There's something off about the silence in this film. Not the kind that soothes or offers peace, but the kind that makes your skin crawl. A stillness where you feel something watching, just out of frame. The Comeback isn't just a horror film. It's a haunting echo of loss, madness, and something even darker, the idea that you're being punished for surviving. Released in 1978, this British psychological horror crept under the radar, shadowed by flashier slasher films of its era. But for those who stumbled upon it, The Comeback left scars. It's not only about a singer returning to the spotlight, it's about what follows him from the shadows, what he brings back, or what never left. This wasn't just another low-budget horror flick. It was a fever dream drenched in grief, wrapped in the aesthetics of gothic decay and whispering corridors. With real locations that felt too real, with a lead actor who wasn't acting, and with a director who, some say, filmed more than he ever intended. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Comeback. Facts buried beneath the floorboards, edited out of foreign releases, whispered between cast members, and in some cases, simply denied. 1. The missing scene nobody talks about. In most international versions of The Comeback, a crucial scene is simply gone. It wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate excision. The scene in question? A slow, excruciating sequence in which the ghostly figure of the protagonist's murdered wife stands motionless at the foot of the bed, breathing heavily, as the camera lingers far too long without a single cut. Test audiences reportedly became physically uncomfortable watching it. One even vomited in the theater lobby. Distributors feared the tone was too oppressive for certain markets, especially the US, and demanded it be cut. But in doing so, they erased a pivotal moment of dread, one that blurred the line between supernatural presence and psychological collapse. Director Pete Walker later confessed that this was the one cut he fought hardest against and lost. To this day, the original negative of that scene has never resurfaced. Some fans whisper that the scene was cursed, that anyone who tried to screen it experienced a string of bizarre misfortunes. But if that's just myth or marketing, no one's ever confirmed. 2. Jack Jones wasn't supposed to act, he was supposed to break. Jack Jones was known for his velvet voice and polished persona. He wasn't supposed to star in a psychological horror film, and certainly not one where his character spirals into emotional decay. But Walker didn't want an actor, he wanted someone real, someone unprepared, someone who could crack. Throughout production, Jones was deliberately kept in the dark about certain plot elements. Scenes were restructured without warning. Fake scripts were handed out. Walker reportedly instructed crew members to ignore Jones between takes, to make him feel isolated. It worked. Jones later admitted that during the final scenes, the breakdown wasn't performance, it was genuine emotional exhaustion. He called the experience the closest thing to a nervous breakdown I've ever had. And that haunted look in his eyes by the end, that wasn't makeup. That was sleep deprivation, paranoia, and something he still refuses to talk about. 3. The house wasn't just old, it was unwelcoming. The sprawling countryside manor used as the main location wasn't a set. It was a real derelict estate, one with a reputation. Locals warned the crew about the place, not just because it was falling apart, but because strange things happened there. Lights flickered despite being disconnected. Locked doors creaked open in the middle of the night. Pete Walker chose it for exactly that reason. "I didn't want the actors to feel safe," he said in an interview. "If they weren't comfortable, the audience wouldn't be either." But things escalated. A camera lens shattered without cause twice. A sound technician quit mid-shoot after claiming he saw a figure in the monitor that wasn't in the room. At one point, Jack Jones refused to stay overnight in the building, insisting on a hotel miles away. The production didn't just film fear, they fed off it. And whatever the house held, it made sure it left an imprint on everyone involved. 4. A real crime scene almost shut down the film. Midway through production, local authorities nearly shut everything down. Not because of permits, not because of noise, but because the film's set, specifically the basement area, was mistaken for an actual crime scene. It started when a neighbor, curious about the unfamiliar vehicles and late-night activity at the manor, wandered near a window. Through the fogged glass, they saw what appeared to be a bloodied figure lying motionless on the floor, surrounded by flickering candles and shadows. They called the police. Within the hour, officers arrived in full force. The crew was interrupted mid-shoot. The lead makeup artist was interrogated. The special effects team had to provide written documentation to prove the blood wasn't real. But the strangest part? When officers asked to review the footage from that specific scene, there was nothing recorded. Cameras had malfunctioned, audio was corrupted, and the scene, for all intents and purposes, never existed. Some claimed it was coincidence, others weren't so sure. That basement was never used again during the shoot, and even now, no one quite agrees on what was seen or what was filmed down there. 5. Pete Walker almost cast himself as the killer. Director Pete Walker wasn't known for subtlety. He enjoyed provocation, discomfort, and the blurring of genre lines. But what most people don't know is that for a brief period, Walker considered playing the masked killer himself. He claimed it was an artistic choice, wanting the hand of the creator to be the hand that destroys. A metaphor, he said, for how artists consume their subjects. He even filmed a test scene in full costume, his face hidden behind that now iconic mask, wielding the sickle in terrifying silence. The footage never made it into the final cut, but a grainy still of that moment exists, passed around by horror collectors like a cursed relic. Ultimately, he abandoned the idea. Walker felt it was too indulgent. But the fact that he came so close, so disturbingly close to becoming the killer in his own psychological horror says more than he ever intended. 6. The screams were real and unscripted. Actress Pamela Stephenson, who played one of the key supporting roles, was known for her professionalism, but during one late-night shoot, her screams pierced the set so violently that the boom mic operator dropped his equipment. What was supposed to be a routine reaction shot her character stumbling upon a bloodied room turned into chaos, because what she saw wasn't what she expected. Walker, in a move he later admitted bordered on cruelty, had replaced the fake props with actual animal organs sourced from a local butcher. No one told Stevenson. The sight, smell, and texture overwhelmed her. She collapsed out of frame. The screams captured in that scene, they weren't acting. And Walker kept every second of it in the final cut. To this day, Stevenson refuses to watch that moment. It wasn't just a scare, she said. It was a betrayal. 7. The mask wasn't just a prop, it was a recycled nightmare. The killer's mask in The Comeback is chillingly simple. Blank eyes, sunken features, and a skin tone that looks more like rotting wax than latex. It's unforgettable, but it wasn't made for this film. According to prop designer Bob Keane, the mask had been previously created for a short student horror film in the early 70 seconds, one that was never completed. After the lead actor suffered a breakdown during production, the mask was shelved, considered bad luck, but Pete Walker found it, loved it, and insisted on using it. It has the look of something that's seen too much, he said. During filming, multiple crew members reported unease when handling the mask. One wardrobe assistant refused to touch it without gloves. It allegedly went missing for 2 days before mysteriously reappearing on the director's chair. After production wrapped, no one could locate the mask. Some say Walker kept it, others claim it was destroyed on purpose. And yet, eerily similar masks have appeared in low-budget horror films throughout the 80 seconds, always uncredited, always unexplained. 8. A scene was banned on British television for over a decade. In 1983, The Comeback was scheduled to air on late-night British television, but minutes before broadcast, executives pulled the plug. The reason? A specific scene involving a slow pan through a blood-drenched dressing room, accompanied by a warped, reversed audio track featuring what sounded like a woman weeping. The film had passed censors for cinema release, but the TV board received a complaint from someone who claimed to have worked on the film, saying the audio used in that scene was not artificial, that it was taken from a real police recording of a domestic murder investigation. The BBC refused to comment. The scene was cut from the airing and remained unreleased until 1995. To this day, no one can confirm the origin of that audio, but those who've heard the uncut version say it doesn't sound like acting at all. 9. The composer disowned his own score. Stanley Myers, the renowned composer behind the Deer Hunter's haunting guitar theme, also scored The Comeback. But you wouldn't know it from his interviews, he never mentioned the film again. The original soundtrack was far darker than what ended up in the final cut. Early drafts included extended uses of reversed violin, distorted baby cries, and ambient recordings of animals dying, some sourced from industrial farming sites. Myers delivered the score, but after watching an early edit of the film, he reportedly stormed out, claiming his music was used like a weapon. He asked for his name to be removed from the final credits, though contractually, it remained. When later asked why he distanced himself from the project, Myers only said, "It wasn't music anymore. It was psychological warfare." 10. The original script ended with a suicide. The version of The Comeback that audiences saw ends in ambiguity, just enough resolution to breathe, but enough doubt to linger. What many don't know is that the original script had a very different finale. In the earliest drafts, the protagonist doesn't survive. In fact, After discovering the truth behind the haunting and betrayal, he quietly walks to the edge of the estate's cliffside and steps off without music, without drama, just silence. Pete Walker initially approved the ending. He described it as a mercy killing of a character destroyed by guilt, grief, and madness. But producers pushed back. They feared the ending was too bleak, especially with a pop icon like Jack Jones in the lead. Studio notes suggested either a hopeful resolution or at least a climactic confrontation. Reluctantly, Walker rewrote it. But he later revealed that footage for the suicide ending was filmed and destroyed immediately after studio review. Only a handful of stills exist, kept in private collections. The original cut, if ever released, would have changed the entire message of the film from escape to surrender. 11. The set designer suffered night terrors during production. Set designer Norman Goff was a seasoned professional. He'd worked on multiple British horror films and prided himself on staying emotionally detached from his projects. But the comeback did something to him. Midway through production, Goff began suffering intense night terrors. He would wake up screaming, convinced he was trapped inside the manor set he helped design. On at least 2 occasions, he reportedly built rooms while sleepwalking, waking to find sketches of spaces that didn't exist in the shooting schedule. One such room, a narrow hallway with a rusted mirror and no exit, matched a location later discovered inside the actual house. Previously boarded up, Goff requested to be removed from the project, citing psychological strain. But Walker convinced him to stay. Some of the film's most atmospheric and claustrophobic sets were created during this period of insomnia and hallucination. Goff never worked on another horror film again. 12. One crew member vanished and was never found. Among the film's most enduring mysteries is the disappearance of a crew member credited only as R. Mansfield. He was listed as a production assistant, responsible for managing lighting cables and transport logistics. But after the 3rd week of filming, he stopped showing up. No one noticed immediately. His duties were minor, his presence quiet. When someone finally checked in on him, they discovered his flat had been vacated. His belongings were gone. His phone disconnected. Initial reports assumed he'd quit, but Walker later confessed something stranger. Mansfield had confided in him a week before, saying he felt watched and wasn't supposed to be there. Attempts to contact him failed. Years later, a horror fan forum discovered that the name R. Mansfield does not match any known crew database for the UK film industry of the 1,970 seconds. Was he a pseudonym, a drifter hired off books, or something else entirely? No one ever found out, and in later DVD releases, his credit quietly vanished. 13. The film was almost called something much darker. The Comeback is a deceptive title. It suggests triumph, return, resolution, but the film itself is anything but. Originally, Pete Walker had a much more unsettling title in mind, Voices from the Room. The name came from a recurring motif in the early drafts: whispers behind walls, conversations with no visible speaker, and phone calls that never connected to a line. The emphasis was on disorientation and the idea that the past speaks louder than the present. Producers, however, pushed for a more marketable title. They believed The Comeback would appeal to fans of Jack Jones and evoke curiosity about the character's return to music. Walker compromised, but not entirely. If you listen closely, throughout the film, there are barely audible voiceovers layered under certain scenes, uncredited lines, reversed whispers, distorted echoes. Some say these were studio tricks. Others believe they were remnants of Walker's original vision, the voices from the room never quite silent. 14. One scene required 47 takes and left everyone shaken. There's a quiet moment in the film where Jack Jones's character slowly walks down a hallway holding a candle while humming a melody. It seems simple, minimalist, but it took 47 takes to get right. The reason? Jones kept stopping mid-walk, claiming he felt something behind him. Not a presence, a pressure, like breath on his neck. Lighting equipment malfunctioned. The camera dolly refused to move. On the 23rd take, the candle went out on its own, despite there being no draft. The flame simply vanished. Walker insisted on pushing forward, but by the 40th take, the crew was rattled. A boom mic operator reportedly left the set in tears, refusing to return to that corridor. When the final take was captured, the playback revealed something chilling: a shadow crossing the wall behind Jones unaccounted for, with no one else on set. They never reshot it. And yes, it's still in the film. 15. The mirror scene was based on a real hallucination. One of the film's most iconic visuals is the mirror sequence. The protagonist looks at his own reflection, only to see a figure standing behind him, smiling. Then it vanishes. Audiences praised it as a clever, practical effect, but the idea came from something far more personal. According to Walker, the scene was based on a real hallucination he experienced during a depressive episode in 1975. He described waking up in a hotel bathroom, staring into the mirror and seeing a child behind him just standing, watching. When he turned around, there was no one, but the smile remained burned into the glass. Walker claimed he never forgot the look. It wasn't evil, it was pity, he said. The film's scene replicated that moment almost exactly, and the reflection effect? Achieved practically with 2 mirrors and no CGI. Yet some crew members insist the smile captured on film was never rehearsed, and the actor who played the background figure doesn't remember being in that take. 16. The actress who refused to speak after filming. She had only a minor role, a housekeeper with 2 brief scenes, but her performance stuck with viewers. Cold, distant, watching from the shadows. Her name was Marion Hartley, a stage actress known for her silence and intensity. But after the comeback wrapped, she reportedly stopped speaking altogether. According to crew reports, Marion completed filming without issue, but in the days following, she missed scheduled rehearsals for a theater production. When contacted, she communicated only through notes, short, disjointed sentences. A friend later revealed she'd become convinced the script had followed her home. She heard music from the film playing in her hallway at night, found script pages in her fireplace, claimed she was being directed by someone who wasn't there. She was never hospitalized, but she never returned to acting. Her final public appearance was at a film festival in 1981, where she appeared briefly, stared at the screen during a comeback screening, and left in tears. To this day, no one knows what she experienced, but in interviews, Pete Walker has acknowledged her performance was the only one that didn't feel like acting. 17. One prop was found years later, in a different country. There's a particular prop in the comeback that fans often ask about, a ceremonial dagger, used in one of the dreamlike murder sequences. Ornate, ancient-looking, not just a horror accessory, but something that felt real. That's because it might have been. The dagger was sourced from an antique shop in rural Sussex, with no documentation of origin. After filming, it was never returned to storage. For years, it was assumed stolen or lost in transport. Then, in 2009, a horror museum in Warsaw, Poland, received an anonymous donation, a box labeled Walker Blade. Inside was the dagger untouched, wrapped in the original cloth used on set. No sender, no return address, just a note that read, "It doesn't belong in a private home." Experts confirmed it was the exact prop from the film, but upon further examination, some suggested it wasn't a prop at all, but a real ceremonial artifact, possibly pre-war, possibly never meant for cinema. The museum keeps it in a locked glass case. Staff claimed the alarm near that display triggers more than any other. 18. The film was blamed for a real-life breakdown. In 1980, 2 years after the comeback's release, a young film student named Colin R. was hospitalized after suffering a psychological collapse. He'd been writing a thesis on British horror and had chosen the comeback as his subject. His notes, later examined by his professors, were filled with strange patterns, sentences repeating, diagrams of the film's manor location drawn over and over again, with certain doors circled in red ink. He began claiming the film had hidden messages layered in the audio, that certain scenes were instructions for real events. He isolated himself, watching the film daily, often in total darkness. When he was finally admitted to psychiatric care, he asked doctors not to turn off the projector, fearing she would get angry. The story became urban legend among film schools. Pete Walker was asked about it years later. He only replied, "Films don't do that, but if they did, this would be the one." 19. The film was nearly destroyed in a vault fire. In 1986, a fire broke out at a storage facility in Surrey where reels from dozens of independent British films were being kept. Among them was the original negative of The Comeback, along with early drafts, alternate takes, and unused promotional materials. The fire consumed most of the western wing of the vault. Investigators blamed faulty electrical wiring, but curiously, the vault where the comeback was stored remained almost entirely intact except for one reel, the first 20 minutes of the original cut. Gone, melted beyond recognition. Walker was reportedly devastated, not just because of the footage, but because that reel contained a sequence that had never been publicly shown, a dream montage with religious symbolism and cryptic whispers that were later removed for pacing. No copies existed, no backups. Only a few still photographs survive today, hinting at imagery never seen by audiences. Some say the scene was cut because it invited the wrong kind of attention. Others believe it was never meant to be seen more than once. 20. The final shot was never meant to be the end. The last image of the comeback is a slow fade on Jack Jones's face, haunted, broken, almost absent. But this wasn't meant to be the film's final frame. Originally, the plan was to cut to black and play a hidden audio track under the credits, the voice of the murdered wife, whispering a lullaby backwards. It was recorded, mixed, synced, ready to go. But during final approval, distributors pulled it, saying it was too disturbing and would make audiences leave the theater in silence, not fear. Walker was furious. He believed the ending without the whisper was incomplete, a final breath without the ghost behind it. In some rare European VHS copies, the audio accidentally remained. Listeners reported headaches, discomfort, and an inexplicable sense of being followed after viewing. The whisper itself? It wasn't just a lullaby. When reversed and translated, it was a warning. Bonus fact: the voice that wasn't in the script. There's a moment, just over halfway through the comeback, that most viewers don't notice until they do. As the main character walks down the manor's east corridor, a faint voice is heard, soft, female, saying a single word, "Don't." It's not subtitled, it's not acknowledged by the character. It isn't in the script. Sound engineers claimed it was ambient bleed-through, maybe a crew member's whisper accidentally captured during recording, but multiple passes through the isolated track showed no spike, no source, no match with any crew voice print. Walker insisted he didn't add it. The editor said it wasn't present in the raw reels. The line was never recorded in post. So where did it come from? Fans began calling it the ghost line. In forums and late-night horror discussions, some believe it's the voice of the murdered wife, not the character, but the idea of her seeping into the film itself. Others insist it was a technical glitch, a feedback anomaly, nothing more. But here's the part no one explains. In a restored Blu-ray commentary years later, the audio was cleaned up for clarity. The whisper became clearer. It no longer said just "don't." It said, "Don't come back." Tell us in the comments. Was The Comeback just a forgotten cult horror? Or a film that saw more than it should have? Which fact unsettled you the most? And what film should we dissect next? If you're still with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation. Because the weirdest stories are the ones buried just beneath the surface.